So thank you very much, guys. So as Crotty introduced, I'm Taylor. So I own the Sports Dietitian Co, which is a performance-based dietetics business in Brisbane. So I deal predominantly with recreational to elite athletes from CrossFit, strength and conditioning, powerlifting and Olympic lifting. So our philosophy at the Sports Dietitian Co is to get you guys to understand if you move, you're an athlete, and that applies from recreational to elite. So today's performance or seminar in regards to this is going to be on nutrition and health and touching on performance nutrition. So as Crotty said at the start, you guys have got to be told a lot of things differently in the past. So performance nutrition is the most important thing at any level that you should be focusing on first, because once you have your performance nutrition sorted, body composition and weight loss and increasing lean mass and those types of things will be a byproduct of that. So to give you guys a little bit of background, obviously myself, the founder and director, and then I have Gabby Ward, who's another performance dietitian as well as Rose McLean, as well as performance dietitian. A small team, very boutique, because I'm very serious when it comes to every single individual who comes through my door. So therefore I don't like mass production. I like to make sure that everyone gets their individual services from a performance standard, because nutrition is very, very complicated and a lot of people make it quite easy and very simplified when it definitely isn't. So to get you guys to understand our philosophy at the Sports Dietitian Co is that athletes eat and train, they don't diet and exercise. So everyone in this here is considered an athlete, and the most important thing is to understand what your goal is and how you're trying to achieve that, because a lot of people come in, they're like, Tay, I just want to lose weight and that's all I want to focus on, yet they feel like shit when it comes to training. And if you feel like shit when it comes to training, it's pretty hard to stick to your nutrition overall. So the philosophy of the Sports Dietitian Co relies heavily on simplicity, practicality, and incorporating healthy eating habits based on nutritious foods into someone's existing lifestyle. Not doing the next fad diet, not doing the keto diet, not doing juicing diet, whatever the hell most people seem to be doing these days, because you can get short-term results from those guys, but you can't get long-term consistency. So that's where a lot of people forget that dietary interventions have a lot to do with your behaviours more than what you actually put in your mouth. And understanding how your body processes and how it works is far more important than just eating the foods themselves. Getting you to understand it's always quality over quantity when it comes to the foods that you choose on a day-to-day basis. So bringing it back down so everyone has a good understanding is that when we come to food and drinks, everything is made up of a unit of energy, and that's usually kilojoules in Australia, but calories, I like calories because they're smaller numbers. Kilojoules, when you look at the back of the package, trying to do that real quickly, in terms of your math can be quite confusing. So calories are quite easy to understand. So when we're talking about it, every macronutrient, which is what you see there, is carbohydrates, proteins, fats, fiber, and alcohol are made up of calories. All right, so when we're looking at breaking it down, carbohydrates and protein have 4 calories per gram, all right? Fat there has a whopping 9. So when a lot of people are scared of carbohydrates, it makes it pretty hilarious, right? When you just look at the math. Fats have the highest calories per gram, all right? So we'll come back to that in a second. Fiber always contains 1.5 to 2.5. We don't stress too much about that one, guys. Fiber is really important for general health and well-being, but it's also really important for the fact that your gut microbiome, which we've had a little bit about, but also the fact that fiber tends not to get digested, okay? Not saying you can't worry about those calories by any means, but out of all those calories are probably ones that you need to least worry about, because the benefits far outweigh the calorie intake itself. And alcohol sneaks in there at 7 calories per gram. So when we're consuming foods and drinks, obviously they all contain this, but we need these to ensure our health and well-being, and obviously we need them in order to live and function. So breaking down carbs is the first one I'll start with, because this is one's my favourite, because in the health and fitness industry, this one gets absolutely slammed. So when we're talking about carbohydrates, it's our body's preferred energy source in terms of the fact that our brain requires 120 grams just to function. All right, so who's done a low carb diet here? I have. Before I did dietetics, it was the best thing to do, I thought. Then I was wondering why I couldn't lift anything. So when it comes to carbohydrates, like I said, when it comes to fueling your workouts, it is our preferred fuel source. And a lot of you would be coming into these workouts fasted, I can guarantee, thinking that fasted training means I burn more fat. That's incorrect. So when it comes to gaining weight or losing weight, guys, our macros and virtually our calories determine that. So if you're eating more than you're expending, so you're eating more than you're training, you will gain weight as a consequence, because that's basic math, okay? When you're trying to lose weight, what we want you to be is eating less and moving more within reason, okay? So as a result, if you do that, you'll most likely lose weight. In saying that though, where people go wrong is because of their dietary intake or their dietary behaviours, and they don't really pay attention to exactly what they're doing. So for example, like, Tay, I'm sticking to my nutrition intervention, or my nutrition diet, my macros, I'm still not losing weight, but they're not tracking precisely, they're not adding those biscuits they're having at the morning tea lunch, they're not having adding the extra alcohol they're having on the weekend. Like I said, the psychology of eating is very difficult, and we tend to forget about that, and as a result, it's as easy as putting extra food in our mouth that you're not equating for, which adds to weight gain. Am I saying that you have to be that OCD with nutrition? No, you don't need to be counting macros or calories to be successful. You don't need to be tracking food. However, we need to find what works for you, because if you're doing something when you're an individual who has a family at home and you've got 3 or 4 kids and you're tracking macros, do you think that's very sensible? Probably not. So we need to make sure that the intervention we focus on suits you guys, and that's where a lot of people can go wrong. And in terms of when we're going back to the carbohydrate aspect, that's exactly another example of where people do go wrong too. They go way too low carb for their dietary habits and their lifestyle, and all of a sudden they burn out. And then what we see most of the time with that is they binge eat, because they're like, well, I'm not eating enough carbs anyway, or I screwed it up for the week, so then I'm just going to start back on Monday, and you get into this vicious cycle. Now, the problem with that is you start off having a good relationship with food, right? Then what happens? You have a bad one, because all of a sudden you're like, oh, I've gained weight because I'm eating more carbohydrates, and carbs are the reason why I've gained weight, and vice versa. Fun fact, for every gram of carb you consume, you hold 3 to 4 grams of water with it. So anyone who's done keto here, makes me laugh when they jump in the scales. Like, Tay, I've lost 4 kilos of fat in a week. And I say to people, if we can lose fat that easily, do you think we'd have an obesity epidemic? No. So when we're doing a keto diet, we're cutting out carbohydrates, which means majority of what you're going to be losing on the scale for the first week is a little bit of body fat, yes, because it's creating a calorie deficit, correct? However, it's mostly going to be coming from the water, from the carbohydrates that you guys have eliminated from your diet. Then you're going to feel like shit, then you're going to have no energy when it comes to training, and then you're going to probably eat all the carbohydrates, and then you're going to put that weight back on, and then you're going to freak out that you put that weight back on, then you hate carbs. All right? When it's not actually hating the carbohydrates, it's the relationship that you've created with how you try to go about your nutrition intervention. And as you can see, that can have detrimental effects long-term for a short-term reaction, because we're always after the quickest way to lose that weight. When weight loss itself is quite easy, but not actually initiating it, is it? Because obviously it comes into play with your behaviours. So when we talk about it, guys, like I said, 120 grams of carbs is what your brain needs to function per day, all right? So the reason why, for example, the keto diet was actually created is for epileptic children. The reason why is because reducing the carbohydrates in brain function means it reduces their likelihood of seizures. Has anyone here got epilepsy? No. So if you're doing a ketogenic diet, you can see how it's unrelated to what your circumstance is and your situation. All right, so 120 grams of carbs. That's not saying that you can't tap below that. There are individuals who I've worked with and that does suit them. However, it's base by base individual circumstance, and also you have to take into account what they're currently doing, if that's going to be successful for them. In saying that, guys, when it comes to your exercise, carbohydrates are the main fuel source, like I said, that your body prefers, particularly in high intensity exercise. So even the sessions that you would have done this morning, your heart rate would be above 65%. So anything that's above 65% of your maximum heart rate, for those who don't know how to figure that out, it's just 220 minus your age, then you can do 65% of that. That's roughly going to be burning mostly carbohydrates through your session, okay? Now, the reason why we say to come into your session with carbs is because it's going to fuel you for the workout ahead. It doesn't matter whether you're recreational to elite, we all have the same physiology, all right? So it means our body's all going to function the same. Someone's a little bit more effective when they're more elite though, okay? So your body becomes more efficient at workouts, hence why, you might be doing this for 3 or 4 months and you go to Crotty, I'm not feeling like I'm losing any more weight. And then you're like, well, you're training harder. And you're like, no, I'm probably training the same as when I first came. All right, so your body becomes efficient because it doesn't want you necessarily to lose weight. It wants to stay in its happy medium. So you also got to push yourself harder when it comes to training, but you also got to pay attention to how your food needs to adapt as you get fitter. All right. Another thing that we need to focus on in carbs have a key role in recovery by restoring fuel sources. So think of your body like a petrol tank. Okay, this is very simplified. But when you start training or when you start a good day in nutrition, you start with a full amount of fuel in your petrol tank, right? When you train, depending on how hard and long you train, that will obviously go down. Where people go wrong is they don't fill that petrol tank back up. So come Saturday session, you guys have been doing Monday to Saturday, you feel like absolute shit, whereas Saturday sessions should be more about being fun and, you know, enjoying it, but also giving it your best, because it's the last session before the week starts again. And most of the time people will be exhausted for that, because it all depends on what you've done throughout the week to fuel you for that session, and whether you're actually promoting a good nutrition environment to have those goals. It's also prebiotic fiber for your gut, so really important to get a complex range of carbohydrates. I'll give you an example in a second of what they are, because they fuel your gut microbiome, which is really important for protecting you against cancers and bowel disease as well. So we've got a complex range. So for example, we don't just want you eating processed carbs. Processed carbs are the ones that taste really good, so your white breads, your donuts, and all those types of things, because what that means is it's been heavily processed, so your body doesn't really need to do much for it, okay? So who has a piece of white bread and within like 15 to 20 minutes they're hungry again, especially if it's sourdough, you know, the good stuff? Yes, it's because your body doesn't really need to do much to it. There's not much fiber, there's not much nutrients, there's no vitamins and minerals and those types of things, okay? It's not saying that we can't have those types of carbohydrates in our diets, because there's no such thing as good or bad foods, but what it's saying is we want most of our diets to be from wholesome grains, for example. So we want our oats, our wheats, our pastas, our fruits and our vegetables as our main fuel source and main intake of food, because as a result that's less processed, okay? When you start having more processed carbohydrates, particularly as we age, and I don't mean this in a rude way, is that we increase our likelihood of type 2 diabetes as well as chronic disease, okay? Because the more processed the foods are, your body doesn't have to do much, your body gets quite lazy, and so is the physiology of our body. So as a result, you have an increased likelihood of coming in with those conditions, if that makes sense. Another thing that's really important is when you go low carb, regardless of whether that you're doing that from a training perspective or not, is who notices they get sick really easily? Yep, particularly when it comes to your winter, is because our body thrives off carbohydrates to function effectively. But if you're training quite hard and you're going low carb to try and change your weight and vice versa, and you go too much, as a result, you're going to have an immunity compromised. And that's when we can see a lot of individuals getting sick quite regularly. So if that's you on an ongoing occurrence, we need to step back and look at your food. Like, have you got a good quality carbohydrate distribution? Has it mostly whole grains? Is it mostly fruits and vegetables? Have you got enough fiber? And then if you start, you know, obviously not ticking those boxes, then we've got a bit of concern that we've got to pay attention to make sure that it is a wholesome approach to your diet, okay? Protein. Everyone loves protein. This is another macronutrient. So remember I said at the start, carbs and protein hold the same calories per gram, okay? So when we're looking at protein, this is the one that's heavily smashed in the fitness industry, because a lot of people think if I eat more protein, I'm going to gain more muscle. Now the only person who's really done that, and it's definitely not natural, is Arnold Schwarzenegger. And as you can see, he had a lot of protein, but he also had enhancements with that at the same time. So when it comes to protein, it is essential for our diet, meaning that we need to obtain that through our foods, okay? Its purpose is to basically provide structural and functional proteins to our body, so it means it's not just going to be focusing on putting on muscle. So most of the time when people think about protein, they think straight away anything to do with muscle building, which makes sense, but there's also structural and functional roles with it as well. So it's a sort of structural perspective. Obviously it builds connective tissue, strong muscles to protect our bones and vice versa, cell membranes and muscle cells, okay? Regulatory, bit boring, but it's also acts as a science aspect, acts as enzymes and transport vehicles so your body stays fit and healthy, okay? So when it comes to our protein, obviously the most obvious ones of this is our meats and our dairies, because they have good quality protein and they provide us with the amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein that our body requires to stay healthy, okay? When it comes to plant-based, you can get protein from your plants. However, it becomes a lot more difficult, and we need to make sure that you're getting the right amino acids to stay healthy. So your body requires a certain amount of amino acids to allow that to happen. So anyone who's vegetarian or vegan would find that it's quite difficult to meet your protein requirements. I've done veggie and vegan before. Not saying that that's not an ideal dietary intervention to follow, because it's obviously great in terms of providing your whole grains, your fiber, your fruits and vegetables, but when it comes to making sure you're ticking all the boxes to remain healthy, that also means that you've got to have a good intake of protein. So your protein intake from your plants obviously comes from, you know, your tofu, your tempehs, you know, your nuts and your seeds, all those types of things. But as we can see, what happens there is you have to eat a lot more of those foods to meet those protein requirements. And what happens if you eat more food, guys, and it's over your calorie budget? You're just going to gain weight. Yeah, so you can start to see, not saying that weight gain is necessarily a bad thing, but you can start to see when you're vegetarian or vegan, that's a problem that we also have to take into account if you have, you know, body composition or weight loss, maintenance, or increased muscle mass gains, because we need to make sure that your energy intake from your calories, for example, support what you're trying to do. When it comes to protein, what you guys will do here most of the time, and I'll give this an example when we go through the next slides, is that a lot of people tend to forget to eat regularly, or if they do, they're eating mostly carbohydrates, okay? Not saying that carbohydrates are bad, but if you're eating carbohydrates quite regularly throughout the day, we need to look at how much protein you're consuming, because you're probably not consuming enough if you're constantly wanting to go for sugar. So for example, you might have a bowl of cereal in the morning, Special K with some milk, not much protein there. You get to morning tea, you want a cuppa with a banana and some yogurt and a little bit of protein, and then you get to lunch, you probably just have a Vegemite and cheese sandwich, but it's not very filling. So you can start to see what ends up happening is you have a bit of protein, hardly any, and you get to a little bit for your lunch, and then probably dinner, where a lot of people would over consume, okay? Because it's very, I guess, westernized culture to have a big dinner at night. Not saying that you can't, but you can see throughout that example there's not much protein for that individual, okay? The best thing about protein when it comes to weight loss or maintenance, or even, well, not muscle gain because it's not ideal for that, is it has a satiety factor. So what that means, it keeps you fuller for longer. So, you know, I said at the start, you don't necessarily need to count calories and macros to be successful. If you're a person who that doesn't suit, we can just look at your dietary intake through the day and be like, okay, so your Special K in the morning with milk isn't providing you with much protein. So let's add some yogurt. Nutrition intervention done. Your morning tea snack hasn't got much there. You might just have a piece of fruit. Let's add some YoPro or Chobani protein-based yogurt where it's got higher intake of protein. You stay fuller for longer, and then you can get through to lunchtime. The best thing about staying fuller for longer, guys, when it comes to your nutrition, is it means that you're less likely to snack. Now, you can snack throughout the day. What happens if you continuously snack more than you need to? You gain weight, right? So as you can start to see, by putting the pieces in with the puzzle, by having more protein throughout the day, you're more likely to stay fuller for longer, and that's going to help your weight loss goals or even maintenance goals, okay? And as a result, you're less likely to overconsume. So when it comes to quality, quantity, and timing of protein, which we'll go through in the next slides, they are important because, again, we want to make sure you're getting a good quality and good distribution of your protein throughout the day. Timing, hence why we say you want to eat every 2 to 3 hours. Is it essential to eat every 2 or 3 hours? No, it's not. You can have one meal in a day, and if that hits your calorie requirements, that's fine. Do you think that's very smart to do? No. So, especially if you've got a busy job, a busy lifestyle, and you're having one meal for the day that's hitting all your requirements, doesn't mean from a physiological perspective that your body's going to adapt or be in the best position to remain alert and healthy and energized throughout the day if you're having one meal. But if you're having breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then you're snacking, and they've all got a good distribution of carbs and protein, because we're starting to tick the boxes here, right? Because you've got to be fueled, you've got to feel energized, you've got to make sure that you have good quality nutrition, and you also have good quality macronutrients, which is important. So when it comes to, those snacks that we're after, you want to make sure you have a good amount of protein, and that'll be individualized based on the person, okay? So if you're more athletic and you train quite regularly, or even these classes and you do them every single day, you're going to need more protein because you're more active. That just makes sense, right? We do need a certain amount of protein, even if you're just doing an everyday basis, and that's because we want to make sure you do have enough muscle mass, because as we age, what happens to our muscle? It decreases. It really sucks. So as you get to an age that's above 50, particularly for females or anyone going through menopause, we need to make sure that you have a significant amount of protein because it protects your bones against osteoporosis, which is a chronic condition associated with your bones where they become brittle and break, and it can be a problem from a young age when you have shitty nutrition. All right, because you're not having good quality macros, good quality micronutrients, which we'll talk about shortly, that help you aid in staying fit and healthy, if that makes sense. Like I said, every 2 to 4 hours, we're going to make sure our protein is there. So for example, you're having breakfast, you're having morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea, and dinner. When you're training, guys, a lot of people will come to me and they're like, oh, Tay, I smashed my protein shake after training, so I'm fine. Now, when you have enough protein throughout the day, you don't need more protein to put on more muscle or to get better, okay? Because what's more protein if you're already over your protein intake? Extra calories, right? So we don't always need necessarily more protein all the time, because you're eating every 2 to 4 hours, you're going to be covering that window anyway. So what I mean is, if you're training in the afternoon, for example, you've probably had your afternoon tea, coming into a training session, you're going home for dinner, you've eaten something within those 2 to 4 hours that contain both protein and carbohydrates. So you tick those boxes. Do you really think you need another protein shake and then dinner? Probably not. Again, that will vary depending on your goals. So increasing muscle mass is a goal, or individuals who are trying to put on size, again, that's a different environment and different aspect that needs to be considered. However, most of the time, if you're having a session in the afternoon, for example, then you can have that. Now, if you said to me, Tay, I'm training first thing in the morning, do I need to worry about protein? Again, situational occurrence. If you're an individual athlete who just likes to train every day, not necessarily a concern. All right, but we do need to make sure that coming breakfast, because you've just torn all those muscle fibers. So when we train, that's called training adaptation. You get sore when you first started this, probably this week with training, a new training adaptation, because what happens to our muscle fibers is they break. All right, well, not really break, but they tear. And as a result of that tearing, that's a good thing. We want that because it's stress to the muscle and it's stress to the body. That's how we adapt. But if we've got really shitty nutrition coming in, that means you're not going to adapt as quickly, and you're not going to get those responses which you want, which is not very good if you're paying a weekly fee. Okay, so but that's on you guys, making sure that you need to make sure that you have consistent nutrition and good protein throughout the day to ensure that your body adapts with that. Okay. So as a result, if you're training first thing in the morning and it is quite hard, not necessarily a concern. In saying that though, is fasted training a good idea? Again, depending on the individual. I always say, if you're fueling for performance, and you can still be performance in this crew here, and what I mean by that is because you want to get fitter, faster, stronger, then we fuel you for the workout ahead because you want those adaptations. Whereas if you're just coming in and you're like, Tay, I just do training because I enjoy it, and I want to make sure I'm getting good results, but it's not too fussy, do you really think you need to fuel for that workout ahead? Probably not, okay? Because you may not be getting over that 65% heart rate because you're like, I hate burpees and thrusters and I ain't gonna do them, all right? So you're just gonna be half-assed with them. Should you be half-assed? Probably not. But again, do you know what I mean? So you wanna make sure that it's dependent on what you're trying to achieve, and now you can start to see why nutrition becomes very individualized. It's not just about always hitting your calories and your macros, because you can have someone who's person A, 2,000 calories, person B, 2,000 calories, weighs exactly the same. Let's just use me as an example. I'm half-assed with my nutrition. I'm just trying to fit my calories and macros, and I get home for dinner, I have 2 grams of freaking carbs, 10 grams of protein, and 3 grams of fat. What the fuck am I gonna eat? All right? And then you have person B, who has 2,000 calories, nutrition periodization. So what that means is basically I'm eating every couple of hours, I'm getting good quality nutrition, vice versa. Weigh the same. Who's going to have better body composition and performance goals? This person or this person? Because it's periodized, okay? So now you can start to see that it's not so much about just fitting your calories and your macros. Good examples. So you might say to me, Tay, how much protein do I really need? Now, without getting too much math, it depends on how much you weigh, how much lean muscle mass you have, and all those types of things. But for most individuals, it's between 20 to 40 grams of protein every 2 to 4 hours. So this is just some examples of how you would meet those requirements. So for example, 3 kangaroo sausages, 150 grams of shelled prawns, 300 grams of high protein yogurt. I don't know if you've ever tried to eat 300 grams of protein yogurt, but that shit's a lot, all right? So that's what I'm saying. As it starts to get, and that's a great protein source, but then you can start to see it becomes quite a lot. So we do nutrition interventions where we can go in and be like, okay, instead of having that, we can halve it and add other protein sources. So it's not just about eating whole, like the protein sources as they are, but it starts to get a bit more difficult. 150 grams of lean mince, for example, 5 eggs, which is still a lot, or 40 grams of protein powder. Now, I'm not saying you have 40 grams of protein powder and you guys come in and I'm like, okay, what's your protein, your food like for the day? You're like, oh, Tay, I just had 5 shakes today. That's not ideal either, because supplementation is exactly that. It supplements the diet. Is it the first approach? Not necessarily for the general population, if that makes sense. Because a lot of people have so much protein, and I'm like, where's your food at, all right?
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
The weight of the meat, is that cooked or raw?
So that one will be cooked weight.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, good point. Raw or uncooked to cooked weight will vary, because obviously raw is more accurate if you're ever trying to do macros and calories, just because it is in its natural form. And then if you cook it, it depends on how long you cook it for, all right? Not so much with protein, it's more so with your carbohydrates, because if I cook my rice longer, and I'm just cooking a big batch, and I'm like, oh yeah, I just have 150 grams cooked. If I cook it for an extra 10 minutes compared to Crotty cooking it for an extra 5, he's gonna get more volume, all right? Because of the way it's cooked versus uncooked. Again, when I spoke to you guys, you need to worry about the science of this aspect, but animal protein versus plant protein, when you're looking at your nutrition, we want to have a good combination of both, okay? So we do want a lot of plants in our diet. It's really, really important. We want to make sure you have 30 different plants per week. Now, if you don't do that, don't go straight to doing that because that's very overwhelming. You just want to try and get different color and variety into your diet, but animal protein is always superior because it contains the correct amount of amino acids, which I said at the start is the building blocks of protein, because it's complete, which means we don't need to, if we were just to eat a piece of steak, it ticks all those amino acids. Now, that's not saying that you should be eating steak all the time, definitely not red meat, but what I'm saying is that when it comes to plant-based protein, they don't contain the right amount of amino acids. So what we have to do is we have to combine them. So anyone who's veg or vegan, you'll always see them, rice and beans together, all right? That's then a complete meal. But then we also have to take into account how much of that energy coming from carbohydrates, not just the protein. So it starts to get a little bit more complicated. So basically that's stipulating there that animal protein is superior. Not saying you can't be veg or vegan, but we just need to be a little bit more switched on and strategize how we get that protein in throughout the day, as well as reaching your body composition goals if that's something that you want to focus on. So what I mean by that is whether you want to lose weight, maintain, or increase lean muscle. This is my favorite one because you guys are going to be like, holy shit, that's a lot of almonds. So when we're looking at this just gives you an example of animal-based protein. So, for example, to reach roughly that 20 to 40 grams of protein, I haven't put any brands or anything there, guys, so it's just an examples. So if you need to have milk, for example, you still need to have 600 mils, which is over half a litre of milk to require that 22 grams of protein. When you look at cheddar cheese, for example, it's 70 grams. Cottage cheese is 140, meat, so that 25 grams of protein. You start to get to egg whole, is 3 grams. Beef, obviously, 120 raw, around that 20 to 40. And then you go to almonds. Now, that's 130 grams of almonds. Now, that's also, 26 grams of protein. That's a fuckload of energy in terms of calories, okay? So when we're looking at that, you can start to see the problem. Or my favorite is white cooked rice. You need 6 cups. All right, so now you start to see that problem. I mean, you can eat 6 cups of rice if you want to. But we need to obviously make sure that there's a combination of those coming in because it can become quite problematic. And I'm all for plant-based, don't get me wrong, but where we see a lot of problems is where vegans and vegetarians don't recover well enough because I'm all for that, but if you're not doing it in a sensible way, then you can end up with nutritional deficiencies and micronutrient deficiencies, which then impede your health. Another one that we always talk about is our fats. So obviously fats are really, really important, guys, but we don't need very much of them because of the fact that there's 9 calories per gram. How much you need will depend on your individual goals as per anything. But they're really important because they provide us with fat-soluble vitamins and minerals. They're beneficial fats. So what I mean by that is the ones that help improve our health, and there's fats that do the opposite. So those are trans fats and our saturated fats are the ones that taste really good in our donuts and all those types of things. Again, everything in moderation. The dose is the poison with a lot of things. Just like you can have too much water, doesn't mean it's not healthy for you, okay? Just like you're gonna have too much Maccas and French fries, definitely not good for you. So then you start to see those problems in terms of the fact that you're having more of those trans and saturated fats. That increases your risk for metabolic syndrome, which is a collection of issues such as cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, increases your risk of bowel cancers and cancers in general if you start to have more processed and crappier foods in your diet. It's really important, particularly for cellular growth and hormonal activity, immunity and other basics aspects of the metabolism, but it's still important to have. Obviously our nuts and our seeds and our avocados, our fishes are good examples of where you can get those from. But again, too much of anything isn't good, and I'll go through some examples when a lot of people will say, I've had a paleo Mars bar, so it's better for me than a normal Mars bar. And then you question it, which I'll show you in a second. Just eat the goddamn Mars bar, but each to their own. So micronutrients, so micro meaning we only need small amounts of them. So these are our vitamins and our minerals in our diets, okay? So think of them as just spark plugs to your metabolism. Where a lot of people go wrong when they focus on their calories is they're only focusing on their macros. And And like, oh, Tay, I've hit my carb, fat and protein requirements, and they're like, hardly any fibre, they've got no colour in their food because all they're doing is eating green vegetables because they're scared of coloured vegetables. We don't have a obesity epidemic because we ate too much capsicum. But as a result, we need to make sure that we have a better distribution of that colour, because the more colour, eating the rainbow, which is the basics of nutrition, for example, is where you're going to be healthy from a spark plug metabolism, which means your body's going to be effectively running as it should. As we go into calorie deficits or trying to lose weight, that's when we start to see energy slumps and those types of things. That's part of dieting. I know it sucks, but that's what it takes to kind of lose a little bit of weight. In saying that, that's when your micronutrients need to be more of a focus, because they're going to keep you going. Because every single micronutrient, so I'm talking about is, your iron, your vitamin D, your vitamin Bs, your Cs, all those types of things, aren't just for what you think, oh, I'm eating my vegetables, yay. It's helping from a physiological perspective. For every reaction in our body, enzymatic process is all involving micronutrients. So if you start to have deficiencies, you're going to have a problem. So for example, if you're not having the best thyroid health, which as we age, a lot of people have thyroid problems, is because they're probably not eating enough micronutrients and selenium and magnesium in their diet. All right. Obviously, it's really important for energy production, cell division, which is pretty much what I went through, and therefore an adequate amount is necessary in the diet. And I do not want you guys to be taking multivitamins to get bloody vegetables and fruits in, unless deemed necessary by a medical health practitioner, in which you then can take it, because those supplements, for example, vitamins and minerals in a multivitamin, if you have too much of anything, it becomes toxic. Because it's micro, you only need it in small amounts. So we don't want to be over supplementing, because that's when it can have the other effect. Because remember, the dose is the poison. So this is some examples here of swap it, don't stop it. So when we're talking about calories and volume eating and vice versa, where a lot of people go wrong is like, hey, I'm trying to lose weight, and what I've had for breakfast is a Tony. What are those Tony? Are they Tony Spears shakes? Whatever they are. There's optimal shakes. That's it. One of those for my breakfast, which yes has all your calories and all your macros, but it's liquid. Now that sucks, doesn't it? Because you don't really feel full on liquid, do you? So a lot of people are like, oh, but it's 200 calories. This is brilliant. I'm like, if you're eating 200 calories for a main meal, unless you're a toddler, and even then that's not enough, we've got problems. Secondly, it may meet all your requirements, but what is it again? It's a supplement, okay? In some situations, it may be suitable for an individual, but again, it comes to an individual circumstance. But the problem is it's liquid calories, which means as soon as you drink that, within an hour, what's going to happen? You're going to be hungry again, all right? I don't care how much protein is in it, you're still going to be hungry from it, all right? So we're better off focusing on foods that are quite filling, cost you less calories, and more bang for your buck. So when we're trying to diet, guys, this is where we see and encourage, wholesome fruits and vegetables, lots of them, because they keep you fuller for longer and they don't cost you a lot in terms of calories, which means you're staying fuller for longer, which is a goal. You're less likely to snack, which is another goal, and then therefore you're not overeating any calories, another goal again, okay? So when we look at a lot of our marketing on social media, it's a lot about, we don't want to ever exclude foods, because when you start labeling foods as good as bad, then you start to have problems and you have an increased risk of disordered eating and eating disorders. But a lot of our products on the market are health halos. So what they mean is you think they're good because they'll throw a term out, say, oh, it's high in protein, or it's low in sugar, or it's got no artificial sweeteners, or anything like that, and you get bought into that because you're like, oh, this is awesome. But simple swaps can make a big difference, unless you, especially if you don't want a macro and calorie count. And if you do want a macro and calorie count, there's also things we want to pay attention to. So something as simple as a traditional mayo here, which is, I do per 100 grams, because when I explain to people, it's like a percentage, all right? So it's easier to look at opposed to per serve when you see in the back of a nutritional label. Sometimes people can get confused. So per 100, always think, oh yeah, this is a percentage, okay? So when you're looking at this, per 100 grams, and no one's going to eat 100 grams of mayo, let's just say that, but I'm just putting this out here. When you're looking at the difference, 550 calories, 55 calories, and the Praise reduced fat mayo, 114. So if you weren't very good at math, you don't really need to be good at math to know that there's a massive difference there. Okay, so that means you can still have your mayo. You don't have to have plain chicken, rice and friggin' broccoli for your lunch, because that's depressing. But you're going to notice that you can still have flavour and enjoy the foods that you like without eating bland foods, which by a week you're probably going to be like, fuck this, I'm just going back to my other diet. So then we start to look at, yes, the fats and the carbohydrates and sugars. We do pay attention again to those at an individual level, but at the end of the day, what's the only way you can gain weight? Excess calories, right? So that fits within your requirements, and that makes you enjoy your foods more. And if that makes you eat your goddamn fucking vegetables, then I don't care, all right? Because it means that you're getting more color and variety in overall, and that's the most important part to sustainability of a diet. Another aspect is simple swaps like this. So swap it, don't stop it. Another example too, which I'll say, is obviously extra lean beef mince. But turkey mince, traditional mince, when you look at this, it's 180 calories. Your turkey breast, obviously, reduced fat is 115. So even when you look at the fat difference, this is when you're like, okay, well, that makes sense why it's lower calories, right? Because the fat difference is what's making up the change. So it's 12.3 grams to 1.8. That's a pretty big difference, okay? And even when you're looking at the saturated fat, all right? So when you have a look at red meat particularly, I know a T-bone steak's amazing because it's got all the fat on it. I'm not saying you can't have that, but you can start to see why it contains a lot of fat, because it's the marbling, which means extra flavour, which I know tastes delicious, but also means extra increase of saturated fats if you were to eat it. Not the best for long-term health and performance, particularly anyone here is a carnivore dieter, which I'll chat about. But for example, 4.7 grams of saturated fat to under 1 gram. So you're ticking the boxes for your macros, but you're also ticking the boxes for long-term health outcomes in terms of reducing your likelihood of chronic disease. All right. Oh, this is my favorite. You know these stupid no sugar bars? And I've been a person who's had them. So if you're sitting there and you're like, oh God, I can't believe I eat them. I've been that person. You automatically assume it's healthier for you because it's got stevia in it, which is a sugar alcohol that they use to reduce the amount of carbohydrates, for example, in food. So for example, if you're using Equal is another example of that in your sugars, in your teas and coffees. Not saying it's necessarily bad, but when you're looking at it, I also forgot to explain, that's like almost $10 a bloody bar. It's not really, but it is really expensive. But it's no added sugar. The funny thing is though, when you're looking at those summer rolls, which are like my favorite, 190 calories, we're gonna have 220 calories. So you're gonna listen to the idiot who's saying, oh, this is better for you, or you're gonna listen to the person who's like, this is body composition goals, and if you enjoy your goddamn summer roll, just eat it, and enjoy it for the sake of it. Yes, it may, yeah, and also when you're looking at the fact that your fat total here is 20.7 grams to fat total 8.1, and then you look at your saturated fat, which is 13.5, compared to 4.7, who's gonna go on this side? Me, all right? Because of the fact that you can still enjoy those foods and educate yourself and not pay a goddamn dime and a dollar for a bar that actually tastes like shit, by the way. And if you ever had that and you've got problems with FODMAPs or guts, you're gonna be running to the toilet because it's got sugar alcohols in it, which are quite sensitive to it. And if you're eating this sort of shit all day and you're like, oh, I'm so bloated, must be from, just being in a calorie deficit. And no, because you're just processed shit in your gut, and then that you need to worry that you're going to the toilet constantly. All right. So again, health is defined as a complex processes. It's not just about it's sugar free, so therefore I'm going to eat it. Another awesome one is paleo. I'm not saying paleo is bad for anyone who does paleo here, because it is pretty good in terms of wholesome approach of foods. But again, it's a fad diet. So we're looking at here, it's paleo, Farmer's Joe. This is actually quite nice muesli because it's got a fuckload of calories in it, so it's got a lot of flavour. Carmen's granola, but you can see the mass is different per 100. So you got almost 600 calories roughly. This one's roughly 400. The saturated fat and the fat total for this guy is almost 52 grams of fat. 50%, over 50% of that is from fat. Somewhat good fats, but the dose is the poison, right? So you can have good fats in your diet, but if you're having too much of it, you're not going to be healthy, all right? Just like if you have too little, you're not healthy either. Fat content of this guy on the right here is 17.5. So you start to see a little bit of the difference there. Yes, that one has higher carbohydrates, and if someone who's like fearing carbs, like, oh, this one's higher in, lower in carbs, this is why I'm choosing it. I'm like, yeah, but have you seen the calorie difference? So it doesn't even matter. Because this one you're going to gain weight on it more anyway. Just because it's got higher carbohydrates, it's got higher fat. So at the end of the day, weight gain is going to occur on the one on the left if you eat more of it. So my next part of it, and then we're almost done to the last end of the seminar here, guys, is a fad diet. This is what I love, because I have so many people come into my clinic and like, Taylor, I'm doing a keto diet. Taylor, I'm doing a carnivore diet, which I can't stand. Taylor, I'm doing intermittent fasting, all of these types of things. Now, you will achieve weight loss in any of those circumstances if they're creating a calorie deficit. All right, you can do a ketogenic diet and it can work. It's very hard, but it can work. But is it sustainable? Does it reflect your lifestyle? If you've got a family of 3 at home and you're doing intermittent fasting, you're doing a ketogenic diet, do you think that's sensible? Probably not. Do you think it's sensible for your kids to see you dieting like that? Probably not. So you start to see these circumstances because you want short-term results, because no one here wants to work for anything these days, and I'm sorry if you get offended by that, but it's the truth, because they want those results tomorrow. The problem is, just like anything, guys, is it takes time, and you want it to take time because it means that you're going to have a better relationship with food, and it's going to take you longer to get there, but then you're going to appreciate those results when you get there. All right? These guys all work, yes, because it's lower carbs. If you're cutting out carbohydrates and reducing them, you're creating a calorie deficit, correct? Ketogenic, almost no carbs, mostly fats, calorie deficit, you kind of start to get the point. Intermittent fasting can work for some individuals. That's one that I'm again a situational basis. So for example, if you're an office worker, you don't do a lot of training at all, you don't eat breakfast, okay, maybe it's better for you to have a diet that's, fasting from that perspective. But again, situational to your own circumstances. So training nutrition, I'll briefly go over this because I had this included prior before. So when you're coming into your training, guys, you want to make sure you're having some sort of carbohydrates depending on your intensity of the session. So for example, I would suggest a piece of fruit, particularly if you haven't got any fruit in your diet at all. So that's ticking the boxes again for your 2 and your 5. But it gives you enough carbohydrates for the workout ahead, which is really important, okay? Other examples you can have is a piece of toast, you can have raisin toast, you can have baby food, you can have fruit puree, those types of things that's going to be okay in your tummy to make sure you're fueling yourself effectively. Who comes here most of the time with something in their stomach? Oh, well done. 3 of you. Yeah, right. Who comes in here fasted? And I'm not going to judge you guys, I know that is. Yeah, and it's the morning, right? Because you're like, oh, Tay, I don't want to eat anything. And the last thing I want to be doing is a workout when I'm going to be throwing up in the corner. So you just want to make sure that you're using things that are suitable for you. So a lot of my clients who do training first thing in the morning, that's when liquid carbs are going to be better if you need them, okay? So for example, orange juice is my favorite, or fruit puree, and that's probably the extent that I would go there. Again, fasting, if you do fast, that's okay. We just need to make sure that afterwards you get breakfast in quite quickly, all right? So these are just some of the examples. The low fiber cereal, everyone's like, oh, you're a sports dietitian and you recommend cereal. Again, it's based on the situation of the individual. I'm not telling you to go home and smash some Cocoa Pops, but what I'm saying, it's going to be based on the individual and whether that's suitable to them or not. So summary from this, guys, is it's really, really important to understand your nutrition requirements and energy expenditure, because say, for example, you're coming in here and you're like, oh, Tay said to have, pre-training nutrition, and I don't really train very hard and I hardly get any steps in. I sit on my ass all day and I'm gaining weight. That makes sense, right? Because you're probably not training hard enough for the need to have those extra calories. Let's focus on your daily food. So for example, if you're looking at it as a cupcake, we need to focus on your batter before we focus on your sprinkles and your icing, okay? But if you're a person who's got the batter pretty good, because you're eating your 5 serves of veggies, your 2 serves of fruit, wholesome grains, vice versa, then you're like, I want to take the next step above, then we're going to be focusing on your icing and your sprinkles on the cake, if that makes sense. There is more to an equation than just macros and calories, okay? So a lot of people might be like, oh, Tay, I've done the equation on MyFitnessPal. Don't use the equation on MyFitnessPal, whatever you do. The algorithm, that's really shit. So it's going to under-fuel you quite significantly. So what I mean is like, oh, I've been eating 2,000 calories. It's telling me to eat 1,200 calories. If you're eating 1,200 calories, that's not even enough for a toddler. So I'll just let that sit with you. So we need to make sure that you do have adequate calories, you do have adequate macros, and you do have adequate micros, but it's individualized and it's based on what you require. And most importantly, whatever nutrition intervention you're doing, is it needs to be sustainable for yourself and it needs to be sustainable for your lifestyle, because if it's not, then you're going to have long-term ramifications and probably a bad relationship with food. So before I go into this next part, which will only be another 15 minutes, guys, who learned something new? Yeah? What do you think, you can say a few things, what do you think was the biggest eye-opener for you? Health halos? Those bars, for example? Yeah. So I know it might be overwhelming because you're like, holy shit, now I just feel like I'm going to start back at zero and everything I've just learned or everything. you know, I haven't been able to, you know, do the right things. It's not saying that, it's just awareness is the key, and we probably need to look at where you're getting your information from. So your trainers, like, you know, if you're ever confused about things, talk to your trainers about them, you know, talk to health professionals about it, and if you need further assistance, and that's why there is health professionals such as dietitians who can help you with this, because a 5-year degree at university doesn't go, no offense to PTs, to anyone with a 6 to 12 month nutrition degree, okay? So it's important to understand we don't go to a toothologist to get our teeth checked, we go to a dentist, all right? Now to quickly summarize, guys, after all of that, I've created an app, and it's been a very long and tedious time because it was created because on the market currently, there's only really 2 ways of going about things. Whether you track your own macros, and I don't know if you've added in all your food to My Macro Like Counter, but it is a pain in the ass. Or there's seeing a qualified nutritionist or dietitian to do meal plans for you. Both of those aspects can be very expensive. This one, most of the time, isn't done by health professionals, which is, for example, you know, MyFitnessPal, Easy Diet Diary, any macro-based nutrition, because when you sign up with most coaches, they'll just be like, here's your macros, you've just paid them for the same algorithm that you guys can do yourself and figure out your macros, okay? Whereas BiteRite is a nutrition-based evidence app that I created from scratch with app developers to target individuals who don't want to necessarily macro count. They still want to be discussing it with a health professional, so qualified health professional, which is myself, so adding more time to my day, but that's completely fine. And it's also cost effective. So to see someone like myself, based on, you know, my experience, I'm about $400 to $500 for an initial consultation. All right, if you do have private health, yes, that can be catered for. My app, which you still actually chat to me, because I'm real OCD about who you chat to and who I hire, in terms of evidence-based protocols, is $9 a week. Now, this app provides you with a meal plan based on which we'll go through, based on your preferences. So when you first sign up, guys, you ask for your height, your weight, your age, your activity levels, and what your goal is, okay? Just like what you would if you go see a health practitioner, because that's what they base, I guess, your calories and your requirements off, based on what you educate your individual to. So this is where, as a result, BiteRite creates a meal plan for you in which you, I guess, assist your requirements, but also to allows you to have flexibility by making sure that it's a 7-day meal plan. Now you're like, holy shit, 7-day meal plans and I'm having 5 meals a day. Does that mean I'm eating 35 different meals a week? No, the best thing about BiteRite is I've created it. So if you want to have the same breakfast across the week, you can swap breakfast in and out. So it creates it for you 7 days a week. Same with lunches and dinners. So if you're cooking for families at home and you've got little ones, you're like, I'm sorry, I'm just going to cook my dinner and you guys can all just cook your own. How much of a pain in the ass is that? And people have done that before, because that's usually what happens when you see a health practitioner or even a nutrition coach. You end up having to cook separately for your family. So we made sure that isn't the case. Once your meal plan is created, that's based on as close as it will get to your calories and your macros, which is brilliant. But say, for example, you chose, you want to eat more plant-based, but you chose tofu as a dietary exclusion, which means out of all the recipes we have, you'll have no tofu in that meal plan. But if you want to change it out, you have over 1,100 recipes to choose from. So when I first created BiteRite, I only had 400 recipes. I created BiteRite in February this year. I mean, I didn't just create it, it's been 3 years in the making, and now I'm roughly around 1,100 to 1,200 recipes. There's no nutrition-based evidence app that's created by health professionals or anyone in general that's got over that many recipes. Each week, we add 3 to 7 recipes that I've created, so that your expansion of that recipes keeps going, if that makes sense. You can also create a shopping list from your meal plan. So let's just say you create your meal plan, or it's created for you, you don't swap anything out, then you can create a shopping list with 3, or however many days you want, like 1, 3, or 7, and then it populates the food ingredients that you need for those number of days that you've chosen it for, which is awesome. And you don't need to worry about macro calorie counting, because the app does that all for you. It's all taken care of. You just got to choose your meals, and there's really nice meals in there, and there's also not meals that are just chicken, plain rice, and friggin' broccoli, all right, which is usually what majority of people do when they go on a diet. There's 2 options with BiteRite. So there is a $9.99 per week, and there's option 2, which is $1.99. So if you do your macro counting and you do tracking, that's okay. I'm not saying that's a bad solution at all, but if you want, good quality recipes that are macro-based, and evidence-based by a health professional, then the $1.99 for you might work. So that means you get access to our recipe discovery option of all those 1,200 recipes, or they keep going up obviously each week. You get exclusive articles on health and diet and well-being, and macro-based evidence recipes from ourselves. But the $9.99 is the premium. So even if, for example, you saw me for a year, that'll cost you over $3.5 grand. All right, but when you could be on the app for a year, and I'm not really good at math, so what's $520 a year is what it will cost you. So what you get with the personalised one is obviously personalised meal plan based on your goals. Record your meals and achieve your goals. Swap meals in your plan. Copy the day feature. So what that means is you choose the day that you want. You can copy that, like I said, to 3 days, 4 days. If you're a tradie, for example, and you're like, I ain't fucking eating the same, like anything different other than Monday to Friday, then you can do that as well. Then you can change your meals on the weekends if you wish. Discovery, like I said, over thousands of recipes, exclusive articles, macro-based recipes, chat with myself or my team. So you have 24/7 access to myself. I don't reply 24/7, most of the time I do. And we educate you and provide a continuous check-ins with you. So each week you'll hear from me. I know it's annoying, but you need to check in each week to see how you're going. People do check-ins every week to change their macros, but if you guys just spoke about, well, listen to what I spoke, do you think your macros should be changing every week? Because what's the most important thing? Nutrition behaviors. All right, because that's going to determine whether you stick to something or not. So those check-ins are checking in to see how you've gone, what you've done the best, what you've achieved this week, where we need to improve, those types of things. And then if I think it's okay, and I think your calories need to be changed, which they should be changing at least one every 4 weeks, then maybe that will be included, all right? An easy to use shopping list, which is great. Now, this is an example of the layout of what it looks like. It's clean, it's fresh, there are good quality foods on there. There is nice foods, there's also soul foods. So what I mean about soul foods is majority of your diet should be 80% wholesome, 20% of your food should be soul foods that you enjoy. So for example, there's a lot of, I'm obsessed with Biscoff. I don't know about you guys, Biscoff's delicious spread. But I have Biscoff oats, I have Biscoff overnight oats, I have donuts, I have all those good quality foods in there. Some of them are just this, like for example, brands that you buy. For example, you're gonna buy a Paleo Mars bar and a Mars bar, and you're eating it because you just want a goddamn Mars bar. This one's 500 calories, this one's 200, what are you gonna go for? All right, because not everything needs to be healthified, which means not everything has to be healthy because it's got protein powder in it or whatever most of the time that they use. So it is very clean, it's very professional, it's got lots of variety, and lots of flavoursome foods. This here is an example too of where you see the recipe discovery, so you can see access to all of these guys and all the recipes will load. So for example, the $1.99, this is what you're going to get. You get access to this in the $9.99 as well, but you can basically, in the top right corner, there's that little magnifying glass. You can go through and search recipe names. You can search how many calories. So if your PT is giving you calories and your macros, you can search, I need 500 calorie meals, and it's going to show you the recipes that suit that. And then from there, you can choose which ones that you like. So this is me, for example. So I'm on roughly 2,400 calories. I'm wanting to, increase muscle mass. I'm currently around about 54 kilos. My goal is 55. Not really, but I'm just constantly trying to, obviously use the app. And it gives you an example of your tracking for your weight. It gives you an example, which I haven't done because I'm on a test flight, so I'm always just mucking around with it. But you can add in your stress, your sleep, how much water, all those types of things, and it's another graph for you to use. And then you obviously have the bottom, when you press play again with it, is that you can choose when you first sign up dietary exclusions, which is really, really important. So for example, if you're vegan, you can obviously exclude all the meats. If you don't like pork and that's the only thing you don't like, you can exclude that, which means your meal plan won't have any of that in it, which is awesome. If you don't like egg, it won't be there. If you're allergic to soy, it won't be there. If you're allergic to shellfish, you can exclude that. So as you can see, it's starting to become very specific because it's done by health professionals. So we make it as tailored as we can without having to pay to see initial consultation for for dietitian or a nutritionist. Not saying that you can't, we've just made it very effective in terms of you get everything in it as personalized as it can be without having to see myself, if that makes sense. This is the example of the shopping list. So for example, if I'm choosing my foods for the week, I go through and I want to make 5 days. It will then populate that recipe, show you all the foods that you've chosen. Just as a reflection, you can go in and edit that if you don't want it then. And then as a result, you can choose Saturdays, days, and for the whole week, and that's what it is for you for the week. Obviously, if you choose really fun foods and soul foods, your shopping bill might be a little bit expensive, okay? But if you choose a variety of things, then that's okay. You'll notice some of those things in there that you'll have if you trial the app. So for example, ground ginger, you're probably gonna have that, okay? But just shows you that you need, for example, 50 grams of balsamic vinegar, and that's 50 grams for the entire week, or for how many you've chosen, all right? Which is awesome. So then you have to do it individually, because what's worse than having a recipe, and the best thing about these recipes is they're based on one serve, which is what I love, because when you go onto a recipe, anyone else, or taste.com, you're like, oh, serves 4 to 5. I don't know if this is my macros, but it looks great. So what you can do with the recipes is for your macros, let's just say I want to have pesto gnocchi tonight, I can go in there, I know that serves my macro and calorie requirements, but I'm feeding for a family of 4, so the app allows you to choose how many serves, and then it multiplies everything for you, and it does the math, which is brilliant, because there's nothing worse than sitting there with a calculator and doing that, or in my instance, I just wing it. So chat function again, so obviously there's a disclaimer saying, you know, a few things that if you are outside of this bracket or you have medical conditions, then my website is linked there, so if you can get, you know, further one-on-one services. But it allows you to chat to us, which is awesome. And like I said, for the premium, you have 24/7 access to that. The best thing about BiteRight is it's available on Apple and Google Play, and if you think of it like this, it's $1.43 per day. That's pretty cheap when you think about it for the long term. And like I said, each week we add more recipes, and we're constantly updating our app based on user feedback. So what we're implementing next week is favorites. A lot of people are like, oh, I love this recipe, but there's a no favorite tab. Cool, we're gonna try and implement that straight away. So we're constantly utilizing your feedback, and we really encourage the feedback, because the app, if you're not the best with nutrition, and I don't mean this rudely, but we educate you that whilst using the app, it can be quite difficult to begin with, because you're kind of like, whoa, this is overwhelming, I don't really understand what calories are or macros, but we educate you as we go through that, and then you can start to see the simplicity of things and how easy it is. And at the end of the day, that's what we want nutrition to be. And also, this is an app that I said sustainability. So we do focus on your goals of losing weight, maintenance, or increasing muscle, but it's not the end, like I guess the only thing we focus on, okay? We try and educate you on having a good relationship with food. We try and educate you on understanding why, you know, that dinner, for example, has a lot of volume, because a lot of people are like, oh my God, Spud Light potatoes. Has everyone seen those Spud Light potatoes? Oh man, if you love potatoes, they're low carb potatoes at Woolworths, and they're legit good marketing, because they are actually low carb, because they've got more fiber and resistant starch, which means resistant starch, for a fun fact for you guys, we only absorb roughly 50% of those calories. So those low carb potatoes are legit. They cost you a shitload of money. If you go to Coles though, they're just the baby charisma, all right? So Woolies has just done a really good idea and just marketed it really well, whereas if you go to Coles, you'll be paying half the price. But for example, if you're trying to lose weight, would you rather a piece of toast, because it's 15 grams, or of carbs, or would you rather 200 grams of Spud Light potato, 15 grams carbs? This one, you know that you're not going to gain any more weight because of the same calories. Yes, you're going to weigh heavier at the end of the day because you've got 200 grams of potato, but at the end of the day, when it comes to your weight, it's a weekly average that's more important, because if you jump on the scales every single day, day in, day out, you're going to fluctuate, and so you should, but it's a weekly average that's important. I use Canva, so I'm still getting used to how to use all of that. These are some of our clients who've had some results so far. So Shani, she's actually a doctor, and she was in Alice Springs using this app. Okay, so she did it mainly for maintenance, but she actually managed to lose some body composition too. So she didn't lose anything on the scales, but her photos and measurements in the app showed different, which is exactly what we wanted. Seamus, he's a CrossFitter. He uses the app, and he's not about to have a baby, his wife's about to have a baby. So he wanted to, have good nutrition lifestyle, because obviously he was doing all the cooking, and he just wanted to get himself, cleaned up a little bit to make sure he could handle everything, as well as keep his training up. So as you can see, he did quite well with that. We don't do fake tan shit, because anyone looks good in fake tan before and after photos. This is Bobby. He's a carpenter or builder. 89 kilos in the photo and the before. 91 in the kilos on the right. Am I right? Yeah. So, and he actually gained lean muscle mass and gained weight, and got leaner at the same time. So as you can see, it's realistic. It's nothing about certain time frames or anything like that. There's no locked in contracts. So if you want to cancel within a week because you're like, oh, Tay, this is cool, but it's probably not suiting me at the moment, then that's also fine. So, which is brilliant. So, any questions? So the best thing about the app too, guys, it has a 3-day free trial. So if you don't like, you want to download it, you want to have a look at it, see how you go. You won't get billed afterwards either. Whereas a lot of apps that you do have a free trial, you're like, oh, this is brilliant. Then you add your credit card details. Yeah, this is not brilliant because now I've just signed up and I have to abide by a contract. Okay, so we don't have that. You can do 3 days. Then you get asked if you'd like to sign up. And that's when you add your details in, being on Apple as well as Android too for individuals. But any questions overall?
I'll just quickly say something, guys. Learning your food, or this is a tool for you guys to sort of learn a little bit more. It's something that we can't provide. It is extremely valued for what you're paying. It's a lot of value. First time I've sort of heard your pitch as well, so actually credit to you. But is this something for you guys that you guys can actually start to learn as you're doing it? What macros are, what foods are high proteins, what's more carbs, what are better choices that we were talking about, actually looking at the numbers you see in front of you, that decision that you can make on a daily basis. And without educating yourself on that, you'll be flying blind. So it's something for you guys to sort of take some time and, I guess, look at educating yourself for a shorter period of time, but you've got for a period of life.
I think it's good too because a lot of the health professionals, guys, such as 8-week challenges and stuff, are contacting us because they recognise it's out of their scope. And obviously when you do challenges, you want that nutrition aspect as well, which is just as important because you can't outrun a bad diet, no matter how much exercise you do. So it is important that, we're reaching out to gyms and to companies because we want to be able to provide that for you guys, being accredited sports dietitians, which is the highest qualification you can have in nutrition without me sounding arrogant. So as a result, we want to make sure that you have that ongoing support. And then from there, if you need additional, then we do have another option as well. Yeah.
Beautiful, guys. If there's no other questions, I think you're absolutely bananas if you don't use the 3-day trial. I've done the 3-day trial. Again, you don't have to put any card details in. You use the diet, so you download the app, start straight away, input your info, go from there. Taylor's written me diets before, probably about 3 years ago. I got a diet off Taylor and again paid the money. Very similar in regards to the learning experience that Taylor also touched on. This is, when you first hear this stuff, and this I'm still learning, me and Eli have been doing nutrition for years. Don't look at it as daunting. Use that road that we spoke about and that accountability. This is forming habits. This is learning. Enjoy that learning process. Enjoy making mistakes. Enjoy finding new things and new swaps and different tools that you can use in your own nutrition. I'll get Tay to send me majority of these slides and I'll put them in. I'll upload this to YouTube as well, so you guys have access to this.
Excuse my profanity then. Yeah.
All good, guys. Any questions, you can stay around and have a bit of a chat. Otherwise, boot camp this morning was amazing. Everyone was on time. Everyone was really switched on and listening really well. As I said, it makes our job a hell of a lot easier. Have a lovely Saturday, guys. Use this motivation to keep going up. Thank you all.
Thank you. That's okay. Thank you.